It's the art of action figures with the Kaiyodo, Revoltech, Amazing Yamaguchi, Chun-Li from Street Fighter 6. I've seen Revoltech reviews over the years and have some idea what I'm getting into, but this is my first time owning and handling one. The articulation has always looked mighty tempting, but something has always held me back. Either I'm just too lukewarm on the IP for the price that these go for, or sometimes it is an IP that I'm interested in, but they go too techy or stylized with the aesthetics. What pulled me in here is Street Fighter 6, which I think has a great art direction, and I love Chun-Li's classy, elegant glow up in this iteration. And while there's definitely some stylization going on with proportions, which we'll definitely talk about, they have represented the portrait and outfit pretty faithfully, and I just think this outfit is gorgeous, so I'm very happy that somebody has made it. Revoltech is the first to release a Street Fighter 6 Chun-Li. New name, 52 Toys or 52 Toys, I'm not sure how you say that one, has shown a prototype that looks pretty promising. And Storm has some kind of Street Fighter 6 license, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that one. So what's the first time Revoltech experience like? How does their Chun-Li compare to other brands like Jada and SHF? And most importantly, how well does it serve the high-flying, spinning bird acrobatics of the character? All that and more on the Art of Action figures right now. Taking a look at the packaging, it's a newer style Revoltech box, matte black, no window, clean figure photography, and to be honest, I love this box design. That's not to say I wouldn't like their older color explosion style, and I can definitely see it being annoying if you've been collecting those for them to suddenly change. But this has a premium, uniform look, suited for a variety of IPs, and it's bound to look really, really nice if you have a collection of them lined up. On the front, we have your brand logos, Kaiyodo, Revoltech, Amazing Yamaguchi, Chun-Li, a holographic Capcom sticker with a little Mega Man head on it, so that's pretty cool. On the bottom, Revoltech, QR codes to take you to their websites. Warning, choking hazard. This product contains small parts, not for children under 15 years of age. Adult collectible, not a toy. Harmful or fatal if swallowed. This product contains parts which are sharp. Be careful when handling. Avoid storing the product in hot or humid places with extreme temperature or in direct sunlight. Misuse of this product can result in injury. Please be careful not to cut your hands with such materials when you open it. The picture is a sample after the cleaning process. Thanks for reference only. All right, covered all your legal bases there. Street Fighter 6 logo on top, in front of some art carried over from the front of Chun-Li's fighting stage from the game. On the left-hand side, Chun-Li doing an aerial kick. On the right, some close-ups showing off two of the alternate portraits, a smirking face and gritting teeth side-eye face, Street Fighter 6 Kaiyodo. And finally on the back, some more legal and product info at the bottom, made in China, barcode. But most importantly, a really cool collage of lots of great action poses, alongside a sort of vanilla portrait pose, a layout showing all of the accessories minus one, which we'll get to in a moment. Warning, sharp object. Use an adult or an adult brain for this part. As always, trusty hobby knife is here to help us out. I've already used it to slice tape across the top. These Revoltech boxes seem to only open on the top. Push towards the back of the box and pop. Even the box design has some very unique engineering behind it. You can see this like folding flap. That's pretty neat. The inside of the box is this nice baby blue. Close your hobby knife. Now, I've already taken this out, so the plastic that wraps around the figure, I've already taken that off. The hands and the display stand are in tearaway bags, kind of taped to the back of the tray. So I've already opened those and replaced the tearaway bags with just a Ziploc bag. We have a little instruction pamphlet showing you how to swap Chun-Li's faces, how to swap on the DLC face for Jury, which is not out yet, how to use the display stand, how to connect the straight and windy lower dress pieces. This, I'm guessing, is saying that you can use dress parts in different combinations. Swapping out the hands, using the hand tree, careful not to lose the wristband, how to attach the lightning kick effect to her leg, and nothing on the back. In the main tray, we have the figure itself with a total of 4 faces for Chun-Li: neutral, shouting, gritting teeth looking to the left, and smirking. Additionally, there's a DLC getting hit faceplate for the yet-to-be-released Revoltech Jury, the front and back pieces for the interchangeable windswept dress, as well as 2 sections of the lightning kick effect. Behind the figure taped to the tray, there's the Kaiyodo display base, display prop with 4 hinges. There's this angled piece that you can put at the top of the prop. Or if you don't want to plug that into the figure, there's also a waist clip. There's a hand tree with 7 total alternate hands. She comes with a pair of fists. Then there's a pair of splayed finger open hands, flat palm open hands, semi-relaxed, semi-martial artsy style pose hands, and then 1 victory sign right hand, all of which have really nice red fingernail polish, which we will take a close look at in a moment. There's a single spare wrist joint. And last but not least, I think this is a Kaiyodo store exclusive bonus face for Chun-Li, and it's not totally essential, but I had to have it. It's her pre-game puffy cheeks face. So if you don't know, in Street Fighter 6, before you enter a match, cuts to both of your characters' portraits close up staring at each other, and different directional inputs will change the characters' expressions, and one of them is a funny puffy cheek expression. We're still not done here because Jury is also going to come with basically this expression, but for Chun-Li. I'm not really a huge fan of DLC parts, especially when it's just a straight up face swap. Purchasing this figure, I pre-ordered it from Hobby Genki, which is how I was able to get the Kaiyodo store exclusive. This stings, but I think the grand total for this was around $150 US after a $30 customs fee, which is a fun new feature of collecting in America. I think it ended up being delayed by 3 or 4 months and just happened to miss the window. Hopefully that all gets sorted out soon, but yeah, in the meantime, be careful buying anything from Japan. I think most Japanese retailers that sell to the US are now offering a shipping plus customs included option where you can prepay the customs fee, so it's not a surprise at least. But it's definitely not an ideal situation. Unfortunately, probably going to affect how I feel about this figure just because it's so extraordinarily expensive now. It was already expensive, like $120. Keep that context in mind. Definitely a good amount of stuff here. I can't think of anything that's really missing except for maybe a fireball effect. For your Chun-Li comparisons, here's the Revoltech alongside the SH Figuarts and the Jada Toys. From this, you can really get a good idea of how Revoltech has stylized the proportions. You can see they all come in at about the same height, but Revoltech Chun-Li has a noticeably smaller head, longer arms, wider hips, and a much more muscular, stylized look, which I think is pretty cool, actually, especially in the arms and legs. Also a good time to talk about the updated outfit for Street Fighter 6. They've maintained classic elements like the bluish dress with gold trim, tassels hanging from the buns, accented shape at the shoulders, but this time more of a bell and less of a poof. Similar bracelets, and instead of the boots, she has sort of blue leggings with just little black shoes at the bottom. They've done a good job modernizing it while still staying true enough to the original design. The portraits also vary significantly. Street Fighter 6 has more of a semi-realistic quality to it, and although faces aren't typically Revoltech's strong point from what I've seen, I think they've actually done a really good job capturing the likeness here. Jada Toys is going for more of a blend of the Street Fighter 2 character select portrait and the sprites. And SHF, they originally made this Chun-Li for Street Fighter 5, but to me, it is straight out of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. But you can see the stylization of Revoltech figures makes it hard for them to blend in with, say, an existing Street Fighter or Marvel collection. Here we have the Marvel Legends Gamerverse Psylocke and the Mafex 185 comic book Spider-Man. If you've played Street Fighter 6, let me know who you normally play as. If you hadn't guessed, Chun-Li is my main. So here we have her next to Figma Samus, my main from Smash, and Figma Farah, who's my main from Overwatch. Here to weigh in on whether thick thighs save lives, D-Art's Mewtwo, another Smash veteran. And a bit more standard around here, we have the good old 2.0 lowest born Saiyan, Goku from SHF. And going over the articulation now, starting up at the head, there's a dumbbell joint with a kink in the middle, going from the top of the neck into the hair. There's a pretty significant notch cut out the back of the neck. And then there's one ball joint at the base of the neck, but it does give you a ton of range in there. And honestly, as someone who's collected primarily like SHF and some Mafex, I think this is the way to do necks. One of my biggest complaints with the Dragon Ball line is they can't hardly ever look up. And yeah, this dumbbell joint with a kink in the middle seems to work really well. Mafex does something similar and it works really well for them too. But let's just demonstrate here. Going back, being careful with the hair tassels, you can see the neck eventually starts to like poke out a little bit weirdly, but I mean, she can look almost straight vertically. With that orientation of the dumbbell joint, your down range is going to be primarily coming from the base of the neck, but you can spin the ball peg around. It's just a little bit of a hassle to do it. Pretty good side to side tilt. But yeah, really the game changer for me is being able to look up. It's not only like really important for flying, but also really important for crouching, which martial artists do a whole lot of. So it's great that Revoltech seems to really prioritize that. The shoulders have something similar to Mafex or Figuart style vertical ball joint going down into the torso. It's just a little bit more external, I guess, on Revoltech. There's also like a swivel hinge joint in there that connects to the bicep. She can't quite raise her arm to a T-pose unless you do something like this and swivel forward and then use the bicep swivel, and that works okay. T-pose with extra steps. And from my experience so far, that seems to be kind of a common thing with Revoltech. It's like a great range, but maybe with some extra steps. Timeout. Hi, it's me from the future here, and I got so lost on the articulation, I forgot to show the butterfly joints. This ball is more of a cover for a ball hinge that goes down into the torso, and that thing functions kind of like a Mafex shoulder joint or some of the more recent Figuarts, and when you use it to the full extent, it gets pretty good range across the body, and then the additional ball joints into the biceps bring things across even further. It's not the most range I've seen on Revoltech shoulders. I know some have that ribcage kind of joint that moves around the whole upper torso, but not a lot of room for that here, and I think the Sculpt is better off for it. Going backwards, it's pretty similar. Pretty similar range. The main issue I have with the shoulders is these bell caps are a little loose and don't always do the best at hiding the hard plastic spheres. And, well, the joints themselves aren't, I wouldn't say the joints are loose, but they could be a little bit tighter. Like you can see this one, it tends to drift between some spots. This bicep piece also feels like it's on a ball joint. And so it gets a little bit of subtle movement in that sleeve cuff. The elbow joint acts as a swivel at the top and the bottom, and it's a single hinge, but because of the way that they've sculpted the arms, if you don't know, your forearm tends to have more width this way and the bicep more width this way, so they've exaggerated that, but arms do generally kind of have this shape where the forearm muscle kind of wraps around the bicep a little bit. And since they have like taken care to sculpt it that way, it's a single hinge elbow, but it gets easily 135 degrees of range. I'm just noticing the dress coming apart, so let's fix that. More technical difficulties than usual handling this one. The wrists, like I said, you can kind of hide the joints with this bracelet, but they're kind of a standard import style swivel, hinge swivel. And so you can rotate them all around and they get a ton of range, pretty much the maximum amount you would want for this type of joint. To the torso now, set the dress aside and I can show you what's going on completely here. There's a ball joint going into this socket piece. The socket piece feeds through this loose sort of the lower abdomen. I say it's loose, and that just means it's not connected to anything, and it can kind of wiggle around. Same thing with the waist. Those three things come together at this sort of like Y-shaped joint where there's a ball peg going down like that into each leg, and then a ball peg going up into this cylinder, which is fit over the abdomen piece. So essentially 2 ball pegs for the torso, which with nothing in the way get ridiculous range going forward and back. But let's see, with the dress, there is a little bit less clearance. Another thing that is kind of new to me about handling Revoltech is they get thrown out of neutral poses very easily. So with the dress, holding her from the waist, I don't want to push it much more than that because I don't want the bottom of the chest to poke into the dress, but that's easily 45 degrees. And if you really wanted, you could maybe push it from the back a little bit more and get a little bit past 45 going forward. And then going back 45 degrees or so going back. You get a good amount of tilt to the side, and the ball joints can swivel around pretty freely. So yeah, the torso is really nicely mobile as well. The hips, as I mentioned, have this kind of 45-degree angle ball peg that just goes into this big ball socket with a ton of clearance cavity carved out around it. All of that lets you kick forward maybe this far before starting to fuss with the waist piece, but if you can slide things out of the way and let that floating waist piece slide up a little bit, that's how you can get high kick. But it does require like a little bit of adjusting in the torso. If you want to do her vertical kicking moves, you're going to need to involve the torso to some extent. And we'll do her character artwork pose more formally after this section. But just to give you the idea, that's how you can hit the high kick. It's, I think, a perfectly reasonable way to do it. It is more aligned with how the body actually does it. There's actual body mass in here that doesn't just squish out of the way. So it's okay that it's not like soft plastic or anything like that. As long as you work with it, you can get it to do what you want. On the other side, however, you can see it's going to be a little harder because the shape of the dress is blowing in that direction. Yeah, not as easy of a time because I think this leg, just because of the dress, has to go more to the side, and then it's harder for the body to meet it to make it look like it's going up. And then there's more room without the dress in the way to bring the body towards the leg. But yeah, it's hard to really quantify the exact amount of range just because there are so many moving parts. It's hard to just isolate one joint. But I think that's maybe about it if you're not letting the waist piece move. The waist piece is a hard plastic. kicking to the side. If you keep the legs in kind of their default orientation, maybe less than 45 degrees each way. But that's where basically by design you want to do this kind of trick where you invert the hip and use the thigh swivel to straighten the leg. I think Chun-Li has a jumping heavy kick where she kind of jumps and kicks out both legs like that. But again, that's kind of what I was saying, where it's like the range is there, but there's a lot of moving parts you got to use to get there. There's a hinge at the calf that helps flex the lower leg or bring it tighter if you're doing a deep knee bend, and that's awesome. It looks so organic too. Sometimes with double knees you get a really like thick knee shape if you bend it all the way, but this has none of that going on, and it is kind of nice, kind of refreshing. They've also kind of shaped the back of the leg, especially for fitting this part of the lower leg into it, and that's all right too. This is also a swivel, but it doesn't really look so good if you swivel it. Like this bone starts to snap, and that's not great. Plus there's a swivel at the top of the ankle, so it serves the function of the lower leg swivel. The range on the ankles is maximum. They don't go up quite as much, but they go down a whole lot. The ankle pivot is like almost 90 degrees, and they swivel around. And the toe hinges are really nice because they can point down just a little bit and up just a little bit. And I think that is just the right way to do a toe hinge. I like a toe hinge that can point down because toes do that. And one more thing I almost forgot. Because of the way the hip joints are shaped, she can also get quite a lot of what I call inverse hip range, where if you draw a vertical line down through her spine, you can make the leg cross over that line. And this is really useful for things like sitting with the legs crossed, which I think this figure is going to be able to do no problem. We'll do it more precisely later on, but that's already pretty good. Most figures cannot do this, so it's really nice, especially for characters that are known for kind of sitting like this in lots of poses. Overall, the articulation setup is definitely an interesting experience if you've never had a Revoltech figure before. Pretty much the maximum amount of range of motion by most measures that I usually will check, but sometimes involving some extra steps like swiveling and swiveling. But ultimately, pretty fluid and makes for some awesome looking action poses. People often say that Revoltech are not made for vanilla posing. Yes and no. So take this character select pose, for example. On the one hand, if you pull up what she looks like in the game, you can definitely see just how much more broad the shoulders and hips are, and how much longer her arms are, for example. But on the other hand, all of that articulation does still lend itself to elegant looking body language compared to Jada, for example, which has a much simpler articulation setup. You can get the general outline of it, the right hand on the hip, the left arm hanging down, the left leg forward, and the right hip jutting out. Even compared to SHF, which has a little bit more complicated articulation than Jada, but still doesn't give you quite as much ability to like tilt the hips while still keeping this leg relatively straight. While Revoltech maybe has the most extreme proportions, I think it does actually give you a little bit more precision, which lets you really nail this type of pose, whereas I kind of have to fake it a little bit with SHF and Jada, mainly due to the fact that the hips don't have inverse range, which makes it hard for her to tilt at the hip like this. And just in general, the Revoltech for me is most convincing that her weight is like mostly on her right leg, for example. And I think a lot of that is just down to the degree of precision with which you can move pretty much every joint. I think my favorite thing about this figure is how beautifully made her dress is. All of the gold accents and the water and bird motifs are painted on really, really nicely. Overall, it's actually really clean. They've used some combination of blue and white plastic, although I'm not sure I could tell you which is which. The other very cool thing about her dress is that pattern is actually sculpted onto the inside, which has this really nice like bronze finish. This is the windswept back piece, and you can see from the outside. And then on the inside, there's this ocean texture sculpted in there. They give you two back pieces, one that's slightly blown to the right and one that is very blown to the right. And they also give you two front pieces, one blowing to her left and one that's hanging mostly straight down. I think a wired soft goods bottom piece could also have been very nice, but I know Revoltech's specialty is more sculpted fabric, and they have done a really beautiful job. Let's show you how swapping the dress pieces works. So it comes in two sections. So it comes apart at the waist, and then you just want to tilt her so that you can pull it apart pretty easily. Here you can see how those two pieces fit together. They fit around this inner abdomen joint, and then there's two pegs on either side. So here's what the more relaxed dress pieces look like when put together, and here's the windswept pieces. And yeah, it's really, really beautifully sculpted. I can't complain about that. Maybe like a fully relaxed version would have been cool as well. But both are very nice. And as I mentioned in the instructions, they actually do point out you can combine them any way you want. So you can use the straight front and the windswept back. And both of these maybe have some interesting uses which we can come up with. So we'll see about that as we go. They do hold together pretty well. To attach them, the easiest way is to tilt her forward. So you have a bit more of an opening to slide this piece around that joint, and then you want to tilt her back at the chest so that there's more room to slot this piece in, and that gives you plenty of room to push together. And you really want to make sure you push the top pegs in, and I find that makes it a lot more secure when posing. Let's swap on one of her more action faces, and we'll do more poses towards the end, but just to give you an idea what the battle mode would look like. Something along those lines, and oops, you can see the dress has come apart, so we're going to lose it if we're not careful here. Let's go ahead and reconnect it. And yeah, the issue is if you push the torso articulation, it's not a guarantee, but it is more likely that the dress might come apart like that. And so you just get used to pushing it back together every now and then. While I have these hip joints here, I want to talk about one thing that was not such a great out-of-the-box experience. That is, some of the tolerances on the joints are not quite right. The thigh swivel isn't necessarily loose, but it does come apart a bit too easily. And the thigh swivel is really important because with Revoltech figures, their hips are at an angle, and in kind of a neutral position like this, they don't actually let you kick out to the side very much, and you're expected to just kind of be able to and you know that trick you can sometimes do with figures if you like invert the hip and then turn the leg around with the thigh swivel? That's kind of how you're supposed to use these Revoltech hips in order to do a kick to the side. And so the thigh swivel is actually really important, and you can see this one does like to come off a little bit too easily, and I'm not crazy about that. The thigh swivel on the right leg isn't coming apart, but you can hear it. It does squeak a little bit more. Compared to the left hip, it definitely squeaks a bit more, and that's because it's too tight. Right out of the box, it didn't move at all, and it took a hot water bath very, very, very carefully, trying to just get any kind of movement in it, and using this tool to just kind of very carefully wedge it apart and try not to damage it in the process. I did mostly okay, but I mean, just to pull it apart, I did end up damaging a little bit there on the inner leg. It's not a huge deal. It's mostly covered by the dress, but it's definitely not super fun to, like I said, spend what amounted to $150 on a figure, and for it to have a joint that's really important and just completely doesn't work out of the box. So that was not great. In addition to that, she has a pretty unique joint to Revoltech, although Figuarts is starting to bring it into their Dragon Ball line, which is a hinge at the calf. It serves a couple of functions. It gives you a little bit of extra bend at the knee, so you can really collapse the leg together and get like a really deep knee bend. That's great. The other purpose is you can use it to kind of show flexing in the leg. So I use that for like deep crouching poses. I think it works really well to convey that their weight is on this leg. It's kind of a shorthand for that. And we'll actually look at that in a little bit when we talk about her Kikosho super attack, where I think the Revoltech articulation setup is just like tailor-made for really nicely executing the, in my opinion, best version of that pose, which is from Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which, if you haven't played Third Strike, it was kind of a late entry in the 2D fighting genre, and it gets overlooked a lot as a result, but I think it's one of the finest, especially when it comes to the sprite animations. They are just gorgeous in that game. But the reason I bring that up is while the left leg is moving pretty well, the one on the right leg, even after putting some silicone oil, is still quite tight and a little scary to move. I think it's okay. The pegs are pretty robust. It's just a little bit of a nuisance, especially for a figure that is so expensive. Her head is quite tiny, so you do need to get close to see it. They've done a good job with fine details there. The likeness isn't 100% Chun-Li from Street Fighter 6, but it's got the right general idea. Her little pearl earrings are painted on really nicely. I think it's probably my favorite set of faces that anyone's done for Chun-Li. Taking a look at the dress up close, you can see just a couple little squiggles over the lines, but it's pretty tidy. Capcom logo on her back, as well as the peg hole where you can plug in the display stand. I have a random dark smudge on her left elbow. Not real sure where that came from, but it wasn't me. The gold trim around her dress and collar is excellent. The black diamonds on her wrists, very nice. As I mentioned, every hand has this bright red nail polish. One thing I'm not crazy about is the way that they've done these ties on her buns. They're a little bit delicate, and they're not as posable as I would like them to be. You can't spin them around at the base of the bun. Not sure the antlers are the right look, at least not for this time of year. I would really ideally like to be able to have them like blowing straight back, but they can't because they rotate at such a steep angle. That's about as far back they can go. And let's just compare that with SHF, which I've got problems with the way they did theirs too. Like, they look ridiculous if you just let them hang straight down. But on the other hand, if you swivel them back, they do have a much better blowing back behind her head look. And then this being an early figure from Jada, theirs do not articulate while I have her up close with the open hands, how big some of these hands are. Big hands combined with the very, very long arms, the very, very wide hips, and the very tiny head do detract, I think, from kind of a straight up vanilla pose. But we'll see later on when we get into some action poses where Revoltech really excels. Her legs are mostly bare blue plastic, but it has kind of a nice satiny finish to it. There is some gold trim around the ankles, and then her shoes are this really nice glossy black with a gold trim around the top, and clean white trim and soles at the bottom. A great looking figure. It's very well executed aesthetically. The most polarizing thing will definitely be the more stylized proportions, just with the big hands and the long arms, the extra wide hips and tiny head. Other than the proportions, really the only areas that stick out to me are some of the joints, like mainly these balls at the shoulder. The shoulder sleeves are separate, like floating pieces between the ball and the bicep. That's really the one spot where it loses a bit of polish. The elbow joints are another, but maybe I'm just used to looking past elbow joints and I don't notice it as much as these ball joints on the shoulder. I think it's a gorgeous design, and Revoltech have done a really nice job, at least like doing their version of it. Even closer now, get a good look at the face printing. This is the neutral expression. When you get really close up here, you can start to see the little dot matrix. You can also get a close-up look at the detail work on the collar. There's a little cutout at the top right under the collar. See a little bit of blue poking through where there should be gold there. Let's get a good look at the trim around the shoulder bells. Just a little bit off the mark on those swirly parts there. Tiny amount misaligned with the blue stripe. Here you can see the little brown smudge on her elbow. Capcom logo. Little bit of splotching on some of these stripes, but not too bad at all. Nice gold paint on these ribbons. Around to the other side, the other shoulder bell with blue and gold paint going around it. The insides are all painted gold as well. You can see the white parts of the dress have this silky metallic finish, and that looks so good. Little birds. Down the bottom of the dress. A close-up look at her bracelets. Not the tidiest paint on these little diamonds. You can see where the diamond is sculpted there and where the paint ended up. It's not exactly right. Here's her red fingernail polish on the fist. It's only on the thumb. Technically, you can see the nails on the other fingers, but they're kind of curled up into the palms. More detail down the back of the dress. The legs are pretty plain, mainly just a kind of bare blue plastic, until you get down to the ankles where there's a little bit of gold trim to tie everything together. And then the shoes are a nice glossy black, gold trim, white soles. And they look very good. Here's a close-up look at the sculpting, the muscle sculpt on her arms, which is maybe not game accurate, but I don't necessarily mind her having super strong looking arms, which I'm not sure is game accurate, but I don't necessarily mind Chun-Li having very strong looking arms to complement her very strong looking legs. And getting a closer look at the smirking face, it's a very, very subtle smirk expression. Just a little bit of curve to the mouth and indentations at the sides. But it becomes a bit more obvious if you compare it to the neutral face. Even the eyes are a little bit pushed up, which happens when you're smiling and your cheeks raise up a little bit. Switching to the shouting face for a Kikoken pose. And here you can see I've got the straight front dress with the windswept back dress. Just making use of that combination. And this face is probably my least favorite of the bunch. I think there's maybe just a little too much teeth. Something I always try to pay attention to when posing, but especially with Revoltech figures that are so good at it, is maintaining like different arcs or curve shapes in the body. So the arch of her spine here and how it kind of mirrors the arch of this lower leg here. It kind of guides the eye on this nice like flowy path all the way through. And this is a good pose to pause and appreciate the inner leg muscles here. I think that really sells the power in this stance. And switching over to what's probably my favorite face of the bunch, the gritting teeth, side-eye face. Between the two attacking faces, this one definitely takes the cake. Not sure why the shouting face just like doesn't look aggressive enough. Let's go ahead and try out the 100 lightning kick effect. First of all, they've taken the already really good sculpt of her legs and molded it in this sort of frosty translucent blue. And something that I never would have thought to do this, but looks awesome, is the silver paint at the tips and just the way it kind of forms like the after images of her leg. I think this is the best I've seen this effect done for this particular attack. It's definitely in the top like 3 or so special effect pieces for figures that I've got in my collection. You can see it's 2 pieces and they just go together with this little swivel hinge joint. So you can kind of change the shape of it, but there's really one way to put it on primarily. You could probably get creative, but the way you're supposed to put it on is this little piece here that fits around her upper leg, and the little indentation here kind of fits into this scoop cut out at the back of the thigh. You want to kind of slide it up the leg. Put the 2 pieces closer together so it's easier to attach it. It just grips right around the back of the knee there, and yeah, it holds on really well. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall off. That's the idea with that. And it looks really cool from different angles because it has this like cone shape. Let's go ahead and put her up on the display stand so you can see how that works. I'm going to use this little adapter piece because I find it easiest to plug this into the figure's back on its own first. Then once you have that, you can kind of work with the stand, and the stand just plugs into the little arm. And then the trick is just finding a position where it's balanced, and this one's going to be kind of tricky because I haven't really angled it very well, and the dress is taking up a lot of space on the back of the figure here, so it's hard to maneuver the arm. And you can use these different peg holes to kind of reposition her above the stand. If you wanted her really high up, you could maybe balance like this. There are screws in this little arm. They're not super tight, but you could tighten these hinges. Just be careful when you do that, because it makes it a little more likely that the arm will break near that joint. But there you go, no hands. I don't know if this particular setup is long for a display, but it's holding long enough to take a picture maybe. So you get the idea with that. Put your Vega or M-Bison here and pop, 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 pop. Now, part of the appeal of 2D fighting games for me is animation style. If you pause the action at any moment, you're going to be left with a beautifully rendered pose. It's part of the DNA of Street Fighter. And so there are quite a lot of poses from Chun-Li's moveset that I adore and would love to run through them all. So let's do that, 100 lightning kick style, while I wrap things up. What's impressed me the most about Revoltech's articulation is the careful attention to maximizing the range of the joints, especially critical ones like the neck and ankles. So often articulation goes to waste because figures fail to nail these fundamentals. At the end of the day, no matter how cool the pose is in the arms and the legs, the figure has to be able to place their feet and look where they're supposed to be looking. I wish more companies understood this. What's impressed me second most is how the figure is sculpted to retain organic-looking forms when posed. I think most figures try to create more of a seamless look in a neutral pose and then may break down as joints get pushed to their extremes. I feel like Revoltech takes the opposite approach, where maybe the neutral pose suffers a little bit, but they've prioritized the joints looking their best when pushed to their extremes. The name Revoltech might have originated from the style of ball joint that they used to use a lot, but the other association I've formed from just looking at their figures over the years is with what comic book artists might call gesture-driven anatomy, bending and often breaking the body into coiled S curves and C curves. And some people might look and just say, well, that's wrong, but it's not wrong. It serves a purpose. It puts energy and tension into the body, and it guides the eye through the pose. As a concept for action figures, it's pretty cool. And that's why I've always thought of Revoltech. Whenever I see the Kikosho animation from Third Strike, the hinges on the calves work together, forming an arc on the left leg and bulging the calf muscle on the right. But then, as great as this looks, sometimes the simple stuff will throw you, like raise the arm over the head. And the engineering of the figure is definitely not all perfect. The leg QC is really an issue. I basically have to reattach the left leg every time I need to move it. And the dress, while gorgeous, is kind of a pain, as it does block range in the torso and the hips, and does tend to split apart a little too easily when being posed. Another issue behind the scenes, the bonus face was so tight, it pulled the connector out of the head and I had to glue it back in. It also has a weird little orange speck on the left cheek. And I've also noticed there's a little bit of gold paint rub on the neck from the collar. All not so great on such an expensive figure. But when it comes together, the overall look is really polished. It comes with one of the coolest effect pieces that I own. It comes with a good spread of hands and faces that are about what I'd expect in this price range, although there could always be more. I think the two things I've missed the most are a Kikoken fireball and a victory pose smiling face where she has her eyes closed, but there is still quite a lot here that's very good. And although the look of this figure deviates from the game art, and I did find it a little bit frustrating to handle at times, I still didn't want to give up because I did find the results very satisfying. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Revoltech Street Fighter 6 Chun-Li. This has been the Art of Action Figures. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.